Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you in today's teaching learning session. I'm Ria Praman. Today we are continuing with BPSC 131 course that is about Introduction to Political Theory. So in my first session we have learnt about what is politics and what is political theory. And in later sessions we have learnt about different theories. We learnt about rights, we learnt about liberties, we learnt about gender. So today we will be continuing with gender and we will move forward to citizenship. So we have started gender in our previous session also, and we are continuing with this gender, which is a very important issue and very important topic. So in last session, we have learnt about meaning of gender, how gender emerged, how it's different from sex, and how there are so many issues that are concerning this gender issues. For example, there is household chores, there is violence against women. So these issues and trends we have learned in our previous session. Today we are moving forward, moving into something which is very deep to understand. So in this part we will be learning about patriarchy, theories of origin of patriarchy, gender concept and theories, and waves of feminism. So in this patriarchy we will be learning what does this word mean and how it is impacting gender issues. So this is something which is very deep rooted in any society, whether it is Indian society or Western society. Also theories of origin of patriarchy. So each people consider or each theorist considered the origin of patriarchy in different forms. Also we will be learning about what is the concept of gender and what are the theories of gender. In the fourth part we will be talking about waves of feminism, how the waves emerged over time regarding feminism. Let's start with patriarchy. So, here we will be going to know what patriarchy is and how it operations. So, when we talk about patriarchy, it is a systematic societal structure that institutionalize male physical, social, and economic power over women. So, what is this patriarchy means in simple terms? It is the power of men, whether it is physical power, social power, and economic power. And patriarchy considers that men are more powerful towards women, in comparison to women. And this patriarchy is a systematic societal structure which institutionalize these powers to be dominant with men and not women. So the structures work to the benefit of men by constraining women's life choices and chances. So in this patriarchal system, patriarchal structure, you can see that it always benefit the men and it tries to curtail the women's choices and chances with various rules and regulations, with various means that we will be learning. So you can say that the root of patriarchy are often located in women's reproductive role and sexual violence. So here it is very, very important to understand what patriarchy is. First of all, it is institutionalizing the patriarchal structure, is institutionalizing the men power over women, the dominant power of men over women. Also, the structure benefits men, secondly, and it constrains the choices and chances of women. Thirdly, the root of patriarchy is located in women's reproductive role and sexual violence. So it is believed by patriarchal people or patriarchy mindset that because women are for reproduction, women are involved in reproductive role. That is why their position is to take care of the child and family, care, nurture, be kind hearted, soft spoken. All these things are considered to be feminine because they have reproductive role to play. Also intervene that why women are subordinate to men, because they have this reproductive role and they can be exploited sexually. So all these things are interwoven with proper processes of capitalist exploitation. The main sites of patriarchal operation state, culture, sexuality, and violence. So, where we can find that a woman is being patriarchally oppressed, it could be within household when her housework is not being considered as a work because she is not getting money in return of that. Next comes paid work. When she is getting paid, it is the unequal pay that comes forefront. State also distinguish between men and women. Remember, in democracy part, we have learned that during the Greece, when democracy was emerging, in the classical democracy, we learned that it is only men who had voting rights and not women, slaves, and foreigners. So here we can say that it is also state who distinguishes between men and women because of their roles that they play in society. Culture also exploited women. Culture also paved a way where women have been dominated by men. There are so many examples for this. Also, because of sexuality and violence, perpetrating violence against women is also a way to show the women that the men is in control of everything. Men is the ultimate power, and this is how they have oppressed women in so many places in so many ways. So the behaviors that that discriminate against women because of their gender are seen as patriarchal practices. So the behavior when we are not, considering women at par with men, we are discriminating at that time. For example, we can say that it is about the occupational segregation. When a particular job is considered to be female specific and men are not, they are not bothered to do that. Also, exclusion and unequal pay for the same work. When women is being paid less, we can say that the company or the boss is having a patriarchal mindset and he or she is discriminating because of the gender of the women, although the productivity will be same, although the knowledge, the education qualification are all same, but male members are getting more money as compared to women for the same job, say for same time. So this is what we can see that are the examples where we can see people practice patriarchal mindsets. So the concept of patriarchy has been drawn into gender and development theorizing. So feminists who explain gender inequality in terms of patriarchy often reject male biased societal structures and practices and proposes greater female autonomy or even separatism as a strategy. So there are feminists, a group of both men and women, who believes that there should not be any kind of gender discrimination, and they consider gender inequality in terms of patriarchy, which often reject they often reject male biased societal structures and practices, and they proposes greater female autonomy or even separatism as a strategy. This entails a trade-off between women's autonomy and men's responsibility for their wives and children. So there is a clash. Why? Because the society considered male members or the men in the responsibility of taking care of their wives and children. Whether the feminist groups, the one strand of feminist group, they considered that women should be left free, that much capable to take care of themselves. So they asked for women's autonomy. A rigid and universal concept of patriarchy denies women space for resistance and strategies for change. So in a concept patriarchy where the practices are very rigid and there is everyone practicing patriarchy, they deny women the space for resistance. Women cannot even raise their voices against discrimination, inequalities, and exploitation, because it is believed that women are meant to experience those tasks, those exploitations, those discriminations, because because of their reproductive functions and their role that is being assigned by the society. So it is always the men who is more powerful and not women. Now let's move forward to know about the theories of origin of patriarchy. The major theory of patriarchy, as you can see in your screen, is first of all the traditionalist view, secondly, the radical feminist view, and thirdly, the socialist view. So, these are the three views through which we will be learning about patriarchy, and starting with traditionalist view. So, the traditionalists opine that patriarchy is biologically determined. So, it is believed by traditionalists that this concept of patriarchy is biologically determined. Men and women are born different and are consequently assigned different roles and tasks. So, they believe that because women are born as a women with reproductive role to play, that is why they are assigned a separate job for both men and women. Since their biological functions are distinct, men and women must naturally have different social roles and tasks. So, traditionalist view talks about the patriarchy, where they say that because the biological functions is different for each of the genders, that is why they naturally adopt a role. They naturally adopt for social roles and tasks that they are meant to be. So, according to traditionalists, since women produce children, their chief goal in life is to become mothers, and their chief goal in life is to become, their chief task is to childbearing and child rearing. So, what happens is they believe that because it is women who is producing a child, she has the only responsibility to take care of the child, to become a best mother to their child and rear the child. So, this theory talks about male supremacy, and it has been challenged by many since there is no historical or scientific evidence of such as an explanation. So, because there is no scientific evidence which talks about that it is only women who can rear a child, who can, take care of a child and not a father, that is what this traditionalist theory has been challenged, because there apart from the reproductive role, no any social role can only be played by women and not men. Both of them can do that except the reproductive role, and that is why it is being challenged. The traditionalist view has been challenged by others. So it is now recognized that patriarchy is man made and historical processes have created it. So, with this, we can see that there is no scientific evidence to prove that yes, they are different. There is no science, there is no, you can give a reference to. That means we can understand that patriarchy is created by man, by society, and not by any biological or scientific conditions. Now let's move on to radical feminist view. So according to radical feminist view, patriarchy preceded private property. The original and the basic contradiction they believe is between sexes and not between classes. So according to radical feminists, all women to be a class and not believe that patriarchy is natural. They don't believe. According to some radical feminists, there are two systems of social classes. So, the economic class system, which is based on relations of production, the sex class system, which is based on relations of reproduction. This is what this radical feminist view talks about. So, the concept of patriarchy refers to this second class of system of classes to the rule of women by men, based upon men's ownership and control of women's reproductive capacities. So it is also believed by radical feminists that it is the man who has the control and ownership of women's reproductive capacities. It is man who will decide the women will be bearing the child of whom. So consequently, women have become physically and psychologically dependent on men because everything of them is controlled by men around them. Now let's come to socialist view. The socialist feminist combine both Marxist and the radical feminist position. So this is also very important point to note. So socialist feminists combine both Marxist and the radical feminist positions. Patriarchy for them is not universal or unchanging. They believe that it is not universal concept. They view the struggle between women and men as changing historically with changes in means of production. So socialist view says that from time to time, whenever the modes of production changed, the relationship between a men and women also changed. And according to them, patriarchy is related to the economic system, to the relations of production, but it is not casually related. So they believe that patriarchy is related to the economic system of the society. So the type of economic system will prevail in a society will definitely impacting the patriarchy and the relations between men and women in the society. So several other forces influence patriarchy, such as ideology. Just as patriarchy is not a consequence only of the development of private property, so it will not disappear when private property is abolished. So they look at both the relations of production and the relations of reproduction in their analysis. So now let's move forward with gender, the concept and theories. So here we will be learning about the concepts and theories of gender. Let's start with feminist theory. Feminist theory aims to understand gender inequality and focuses on gender politics, power relations, and sexuality. So, feminist theory focuses on the promotions of women's right and interest. They believe that women should get all the rights, their interest should be taken into consideration, and also they tries to understand what is gender inequality, and they focuses on gender politics, power relations, and sexuality. So the themes that is explored by feminist theory include gender discrimination, stereotyping, and objectification, oppression, and patriarchy. So it is always been seen that these kinds of discrimination, stereotyping is very common in case of women. So the feminist theory talks about that, and they also talks about oppression and patriarchy that is impacting women. So feminism supports social equality of men and women and is against sexism and patriarchy. So many times it is believed that feminist theory is only talking about women and they are demeaning men. But no, the feminist theory is in support of social equality of both men and women, and they are totally against sexism and patriarchy. So, feminism involves political and sociological theories and philosophies which are concerned with the issues of gender differences, as well as movement that advocates gender equality for women and campaigns for women's right and interest. So the term feminism and feminist did not gain widespread use until the 1970s. So whatever theory we are learning here about feminism, that only gained prominence in the 1970s only. So the first feminism signs were seen in 1840s America for protesting of suffering of women and African root American people. So at the end of these protests, they won voting rights in 1920. So first time women got voting rights in the year 1920, but there is still defectiveness in gender equality in the society that has always been seen by all of us. So this feminists focus mainly on five subjects. So what are these five subjects? Let's know. First of all, they focus on working for increasing equality in society. So their focus is on increasing equality in society so that there should not be any kind of gender discrimination, inequalities that persist anyways. So making, secondly, the making large area of choices of people in society. Providing choices is also giving freedom for people to make a choice. So this is also being focused by the feminist. Thirdly, they wanted to destroy the gender stratification. And fourthly, the most importantly, they want to finish sexual violence that women have been victim in a very large number. So the focus of feminists is to finish the sexual violence that is very not only very painful but very traumatic, psychologically impacting our women. Also, the last focus of feminists were to encourage sexual freedom. They want women to decide with whom they want to get involved and not the men who take charge of their bodies. So, this is what feminists believe. Now let's talk about three waves of feminism. So as we have discussed that waves are mean three time periods where there is in evolvement of feminist theories. So we can say that in the first wave, it emerged in the 19th and early 20th century. So this was the time when the first wave of feminism came into being. What does this first wave of feminism known for? It refers mainly to women's suffrage movements that we have already discussed in democracy part, that there was a time when women were not allowed to vote and they were not allowed to take decisions and participate in public sittings. So here in the first wave, the first target of feminists was to achieve women's suffrage. So here it is about universal adult suffrage. We generally know here women's suffrage mean when women have been given right to vote, take part in the political processes. Also, as we have discussed, that mainly this first wave is concerned with women's right to vote. In the 1960s and 1970s, we have seen the rise of the second wave of feminism. And here, the second wave refers to the ideas and actions that is associated with the women's liberation movement beginning in the 1960s. Here, women campaigned for legal and social rights for women. So, in the first wave, it was political right. In the second wave, the focus was on legal and social rights for women. Later in the 1990s, the end of 20th century, it emerged the third wave. So this third wave refers to a continuation of and a reaction to perceived failures of the second wave of feminism. So because of the failure of second wave of feminism, this third wave emerged from that. Now let's talk about the feminist activist has campaigned for what? So they have campaigned for women's legal rights, that is rights to rights of contract, property rights, and voting rights. Secondly, they have campaigned for women right to bodily integrity and autonomy, for abortion rights and for reproductive rights because it is the body of the women, and feminists believe that the decision regarding someone's body should be taken by them only and not any outsider, especially a male member, because a woman should know her body as much best way as nobody can even understand. So here the feminists try to campaign for women's right to bodily integrity and autonomy, for abortion rights, for reproductive rights, whether they should take contraceptions or not, whether the quality of the prenatal care is okay or not. All these rights, reproductive rights, should be with women, as this is what the feminists activists say campaigned for. Also, they campaigned for the protection of women and girls from domestic violence, sexual harassment, and rape. So these are the few ways through which men tries to dominate and exploit the women, because they believe that women are inferior to them and they are superior. So they have advantage of doing whatever they want. So these social evils like domestic violence, sexual harassment, and rape, they considered as a tool to punish and take revenge from women, and only for enjoyment. So this is what feminist activists wanted to change, bring a change in the society, because women should be protected from these kinds of harmful impacts that patriarchy brings with it. And it is also important because women and men are equals, and if one part is exploiting the other, the society will be leading towards inequality, and this is what feminist activists have campaigned for. Additionally, they have campaigned for workplace rights, including maternity leave and equal pay. So, here, let's talk about maternity leave in detail, because there is a concern among the employers that any women employee who is planning a child will be less productive after giving birth to a child. So, this idea, because women are considered to be taking care of the children of the family. So it is a general conception, general stereotype that women will be less productive after reproducing a child. So here, feminist activists have campaigned for maternity leave, where they should be given a particular time period to recover, and also they should be getting paid, because giving birth to a child is something which is very important, and it is their also their own choice to do that, and nobody can stop them, whether it is an employer or a very big company. So that is the reason why women have been given maternity leave and equal pay. So also feminists believe that there should be end of misogyny, and also they are also against other forms of gender specific discrimination against women. Now let's talk about liberal feminism. Liberal feminism asserts the equality of men and women through political and legal reform. It is an individualistic form of feminism which focuses on women's ability to show and maintain their equality through their own actions and choices. So, liberal feminism uses the personal interactions between men and women as the place from which to transform society. So, according to the liberal feminists, all women are capable of asserting their ability to achieve equality, and therefore, it is possible for change to happen without altering the structure of the society. This is what the liberal feminism believes. The liberal feminist addresses the issues related to reproductive and abortion rights, sexual harassment, voting, education, equal pay for equal work, affordable childcare, healthcare, and etc. Now, we have completed with Unit 8, that is about gender. Now, let's move towards Unit 9, that is citizenship. So, to introduce citizenship, let's see what does it mean and how it is important for every individual, because this is something which is very very important for a person's identity. So in general terms, when we are talking about citizenship, we can say that it is a relationship between an individual and the state. So do remember that when there was monarchy and there were princely states in India and kingdom all over the world, there we can't say the people were citizens. Why? Because those people were only subjects who are bound to accept whatever their kings have announced, whether they have guided, whether whatever the decisions taken by the king, they are bound to accept that, we have bound to believe in that, and they can't question in return. When we talk about citizens, they have a right to ask questions to the government, whether they have that much power, because it is them who voted for the government to sit there for representing them. So this is what a general a distinction between kings and subjects and state and citizens. So here we can say that citizenship is a relationship between an individual and state. It is seen in the context of complementary rights and responsibilities. So citizenship is both rights and a responsibility. According to T.H. Marshall, citizenship is full and equal membership in a political community. So, do remember this definition, where T.H. Marshall is saying that citizenship is full of equal membership in a political community. So, in recent times, citizenship was limited and exclusionary in nature. So, there is a limit and an exclusion that functions behind citizenship. So, people, only those who had property, were given citizenship rights. Women and slaves were excluded from these rights. So, initially, in the ancient times, in the earlier times, the citizenship was limited and exclusionary in nature. The people, the aristocrat men who have property with them, they were giving citizenship, but women and slaves were excluded from these rights. It was with the advent of the modern liberal states that the demand for equality gained momentum. So, since the time modern liberal states emerged in our world, from then onwards, there is a demand for equality gained momentum. So it also resulted in socio-economic inclusion of the marginalized section. So in the earlier time, women, slaves cannot become a citizen of a state. But when the modern government and modern state emerged, there is an economic and social inclusion of people coming from the marginalized section of the society. So, for a democracy, the citizenship should take active part in governance, which ensures accountability. So, when we talk about a passive citizenship, it leads to stagnation in any democracy and could further alienate the representatives from the people. So, what have reignited the citizenship issue is it is the globalization which have reignited the debate around the concept of citizenship. So now let's discuss what do we mean by the concept of citizenship. Citizenship is the status of a person recognized under the custom or law as being a legal member of a sovereign state or part of a nation. Do understand this line very clearly and very deep line it is that citizenship is the status of a person who is recognized under the custom or law as being a legal member of a sovereign state or part of a nation. So, here, a person who is a legal member of a sovereign state. What do we mean by a sovereign state? Where the decisions of the state are taken by only the people residing there, not any outside force. So, when India was under the British control. India was not a sovereign state because India's decisions were taken by Britishers and not Indians. But after independence, it was the Indian government, the people who are representative of the population, they were taking decisions on their own without any external influence. Then onwards, India became a sovereign state. So this is an example from for what we mean by a sovereign state. So, citizenship is a status of a person who is recognized the custom or under the customs or law as being a legal member of a sovereign state or part of a nation. So, a person may have multiple citizenship also. This is also a different and important, point that you have to remember. A person may have multiple citizenship, and who does not have citizenship of any state is said to be stateless. So there are so many people who doesn't have citizenship of any state. So they are considered to be as stateless. So the term citizen can be understood in a narrow or in a broad sense. So we can understand citizenship from a narrower point of view and also a broader point of view, starting with the narrower sense. So in narrower sense, it means citizenship means the resident of a city or one who enjoys the privilege of living in a city. So, what is the narrow perspective of citizenship is that it is that a resident of a city have the privilege in living in the city. But in the broader sense, a citizen means a person who resides within the territorial limits of the state. So here we can say that there is a limit, there is a territorial boundary, and a person who is a citizen can reside within the territorial limits of the particular state. So citizenship and nationality are the same in the legal sense. So in legal sense, we can say that whether you are a citizen or whether you are, believe in nationality, it is same. Conceptually, citizenship is focused on the internal political life of the state, and nationality is a matter of international dealings. So, this distinction is very important to understand. If you can, please, write it down in your notebook that what is the difference between citizenship and nationality. So, in first column, you can write citizenship, which is focused on the internal political life of a state. On the right hand side, in the second column, you can write that nationality is a matter of international dealings. So, this, both legally same terms are different in, concept. So, in the modern era, the concept of full citizenship encompasses not only active political rights but full civil and social rights. This is also very important to note down. that the concept of full citizenship encompasses not only active political right for that individual, but also full civil and social rights. So, historically, the most significant difference between a national and a citizen is that the citizen has the right to vote for elected officials and to be elected. So, if you say that I am a citizen or I am a national of this particular country, so there is a difference. A citizen has the right to vote for elected officials and to be elected. He or she can also get elected if he or she is a citizen of a particular country. So until 19th and 20th century, it was typical for only a small percentage of people who belong to a city or state to be full citizens. So it is, a very long time in our past that not all people were citizen of a particular state. It is a very less number of percentage who can say that yes, we are citizens of the particular country. So in the past, most people were excluded from citizenship on the basis of their gender, class, ethnicity, religion, and other factors. So here we can say that citizenship was not universal to everyone, but it was based on the gender of the individual, whether he or she is belonging to a particular class or not, whether he or she is belonging to a particular ethnicity or religion. So these factors also, considered important while giving citizenship to a particular individual in ancient times. Let's talk about the three types of rights that is associated with citizenship. So when we talk about citizenship, there are three types of rights we can associate it with. Firstly, it is the civil rights. Secondly, political rights. And third is social rights. Let's start with civil rights. Civil rights are related to individual freedoms like liberty, freedom of speech and expression, etc. So these rights can be seen as power against the state as they safeguard dissent in a democracy. As I have already discussed in the previous slide, that how king and subjects, state and citizens are different from each other. Why? Because the state is something which gives, the citizens living in that particular state have liberty and freedom of speech and expression against state also, but in limited form. So these rights of the individual, the civil rights, can be seen as a power against the state because they safeguard dissent in a democracy. Now let's move forward towards political rights, which are the rights which an individual takes part in political life of his or her country, like the right to vote, right to form and join a political party, etc. So these are the political rights that is given to a particular citizen. Now let's see that how these rights are associated with parliamentary institutions in a democracy. So ultimately, these political rights are giving, advantage and weightage towards establishing democracy in a particular society. Now let's move towards social rights. What are social rights? The social rights refer to the right to share social and cultural heritage. People also has their own culture and they share their culture with so many people. So the welfare state idea gained around after the Second World War, and it is the state's duty to guarantee a minimum living standard in order to iron out inequalities between the citizens. So not all citizens are on same, class. They belong to different classes. So it is believed that there should be a welfare state who will take care that at least, guarantee they can guarantee a minimum living standard so that inequalities can be meted out. Let's talk about the determining factors of citizenship. So each country has its own policies, regulations, and criteria as to who is entitled to a citizenship. So each country can have different, policies to understand and to, they can classify citizens on their own basis, different from each to others. So a person can be recognized or granted citizenship on a number of grounds. Usually, citizenship based on the place of birth is automatic. In other cases, an application may be required that we are going to learn in deep in our upcoming slides. So, citizens are of two types. natural born citizens and naturalized citizens. So, what is the difference? So, natural born citizens are those who are the citizens of a state by virtue of their birth or blood relations. So, if a person get birth in India and they have blood relations with India, so he or she will become naturally a citizen of. Naturalized citizens are those who are foreigners in nature and who are granted the citizenship of the country on the fulfillment of some conditions that are laid down by the respective country. Now let's see what we mean by citizenship by birth. So if one or both of a person's parents are citizen of a given state, then the person may have the right to be a citizen of that state as well. So do understand, do learn this, because this is a way through how you describe, and differences can be seen in how the citizenship is being granted to a particular individual. The first category, the first determining factor is the citizenship by birth, where if one or both the parents of a citizen, both the parent of the child is belong to a particular country and is a citizen of that country, then the person may have the right to be a citizen of that state as well. So, states normally limit the right to citizenship by descent to a certain number of generations born outside the state. So, this form of citizenship is not common in civil law countries. This is also a very important point to note it down. Now, let's talk about the person who born within a country. So, some people are automatically citizens of the state in which they are born. And this form of citizenship originated in England, where those who were born within the realm were the subjects of the monarch, and is common in. Let's come to the citizenship by marriage issue. So, many countries fast track naturalization process based on the marriage of a person to a citizen. So, the countries which are destinations for such immigration often have regulations to try and deter false marriages, because there are so many cases in the past that people get married to get citizenship of that particular country. So it is where a citizenship marries a non-citizen, typically for payment, without them having the intention of living together. So these are all the issues that is related with the idea of citizenship. Another one is naturalization process. So states normally grant citizenship to people who have entered the country legally. Also, they have been granted permit to stay or been granted political asylum and also lived there for a specific period. So, in some countries, naturalization is subject to conditions which may include passing a test of demonstrating reasonable knowledge of the language or way of life of the host country, good conduct and moral character, and renouncing their prior citizenship. So, some states allow dual citizenship and do not require naturalized citizen to formally announce any other citizenship. So, this is how naturalization process works. Let's talk about evolutions of the concept of citizenship, from where this citizenship concept evolved. So, the concept of citizenship goes back to the ancient Greek city states, where the population was divided into two classes: first, the citizens, and other, the slaves. So, the citizens enjoyed both civil and political rights, and they have directly or indirectly participated in all functions of the civil and political life of the state. Whereas the slaves enjoyed none of such rights and suffered from all kind of political and economic disabilities. So slaves have been excluded, they have been marginalized by the Greek city states, because they are not considered to be citizen, because their class is not matched with the other people who were landed class. So women were not given citizenship rights, which were reserved only for free native born men. So in ancient Greek city state, who were citizens? Free native born men. Women, slaves are all excluded from this category. So in Greece, the term citizen was used in a very narrow sense. Only those who enjoyed civil and political rights and who participated in the functions of the civil and political life of people were regarded as citizens. When we talk about Rome, people belonging to only rich class, known as patricians, were privileged to enjoy the civil and political rights. So here in Rome, it is about rich class. The rest of the population was not privileged to enjoy any such rights. So people who were belonging to the marginalized section, poor section, were not given the citizenship by Rome people. In the medieval times, citizenship was associated with protection of by the state, as the absolute states wanted to impose their authority over their diverse population. So, in the modern notion of citizenship seeks to strike a balance between freedom and equality. Also, inequalities like caste, class, gender, etc., are being eliminated by providing conditions of equality through affirmative action. So, this is how, in the modern notion, citizenships, idea have changed. Now, let's talk about theories of citizenship. So here you can see a list of theories that talks about citizenship in their own perspective. So here are liberal theory, republican theory, libertarian theory, communitarian theory, Marxist theory, pluralist theory, feminist perspective, and Gandhi's view. So these are the theories, these are the perspective through which citizenship is being studied. Let's start with liberal theory. So, according to this theory, liberal rights constitute the foundation of citizenship, and it revolves around the notion of individualism. So, liberal theory always talks about the individual as the basic unit. So, here also the citizenship's idea is being revolved around individualism by liberal theorists. So, citizenship is a legal status which confers certain rights on the individual, protecting him from state interference. So, liberal theory talks about individualism, where they want a person to be free because, according to liberal theory, a person, an individual, can have that much of reasonable, powers that they can think good of themselves. So, here also, they say that there are certain rights on the individual protecting him from state interference. So, citizenship stands for equality, while capitalism breeds class inequality. So, this is the reason why T.H. Marshall entrusted the state with welfare functions to take care of the needy ones by ensuring minimum standard of living, that is, social security. Now, let's talk about Republican theory. What do we mean by Republican theory? So, the theory focuses on civic self rule through participation of citizens. So, here the participation of citizen is important. Why? Because active participation in deliberation and policy making is advocated. So, unlike liberals who see citizenship as being protected by law, Republicans want participation in formulation of law. So this is the difference between the liberal theory and the Republican theory. So liberals want representative democracy, while Republicans promote deliberative democracy. So these are the differences that you can mention, you can note it down properly, that it will help in your exams and also for lifelong knowledge. So, for Republicans, citizenship can unite citizens as long as identity is stronger than their other identities like religion, ethnicity, etc. Republicans criticize communitarians also, as well as they are apprehensive of local identities being placed above the civic rules. So, now let's talk about libertarian theory. Libertarian citizenship can be traced to British conservative government under Margaret Thatcher in the year 1979, who gave more importance to market rights over social rights. So it is believed that the social rights or the welfare policies were becoming unaffordable for the state. So they have argued among themselves that people seek to pursue their values and preferences through private activity rather than the public redistribution. So libertarians say that citizenship is the product of free choice and contract among individuals. So it considers market society as its basis and a suitable model of civic life. So here you can say that the libertarian theory is propounded by Robert Nozick, who is the chief exponent of this theory. Also, libertarian prioritize market rights, which are seen as entrepreneurial freedom. So they want freedom to earn and own property as well as its product. This is what libertarian theory believes. Now let's talk about communitarian theory. Communitarians argue that an individual does not exist prior to the community. In on one hand, in liberal theory it is about the individual, but in communitarian theory it is always the community which comes first, and then an individual. So communitarians criticize liberals for ignoring social nature of individuals by focusing too much on the individual. So they believe, the communitarians believe, that they argue that liberals have not given any importance to duties and responsibilities towards community, as their focus is on rights of an individual. So communitarians believe that there is also responsibilities and duties that should be given importance, and not only focusing only about the rights of the individual. So, the main tenet of this theory is that a citizen should identify himself with the community of which he is a member and take part in its political life and contribute to the realization of civic virtues. So, this is what this communitarian theory talks about. They want the citizens should identify themselves with the community and not think only about their individualistic perspective. So, community, why it is important for communitarian theorists? Because the individual is a member of that particular community, and he or she should take part in its political life and contribute to the realization of civic virtues. So communitarian citizenship gives more importance to group rights over individual rights. This is a very important point that you should note it down. Now let's talk about Marxist theory. What does it mean? So, according to this theory, rights associated with citizenship are a byproduct of class conflict. So, Marxist theory believes that whichever rights which are associated with the idea of citizenship, they are a product of class conflict. So, economically weaker section are not in a position to exercise their citizenship rights due to dominance of economically powerful sections. So, they have the Marxist theory talks about the practicalities of attaining, the citizenship status, where it is found that there are many instances that we can say that there is a dominance of the economically powerful sections over the weaker section of the society. And according to Marxist theorists, citizenship rights are only exercised by those and not by the marginalized section. So Marxists believe that since the state will wither away after the revolution, the concept of citizenship itself is temporary. So Marxist theory talks about a time when proletariats will revolt, and proletariats will create a state, but within a time period, state will wither away because the society will become very very equal, where we don't need any state, because it is believed that state is tool in the hands of the bourgeois class or the landed and powerful class. So Marxists believe that state will wither away anyhow, and that is why this concept of citizenship is very very temporary, because once the state doesn't exist, there is no need of citizenship. So since there are no political institutions in a communist state, there will no need for citizenship. Also, Anthony Giddens argued that the development of modern democracy and citizenship began in the 16th century, when the state started to increase its administrative power to supervise the population and store data regarding them. So, this was what Anthony Giddens is saying, that why the citizenships idea evolved, because it was because of the increase in administrative power to supervise the population and store data regarding them. So, this is why the concept of citizenship emerged according to the Marxist theory. Now, let's talk about pluralist theory. So, this theory treats the development of citizen as a multi-dimensional and complex process, and attributes the evolution of the concept of citizen to a diverse set of factors. So it believes that citizenship means a reciprocal relationship between individual and community, which is being argued by David Held. So according to this pluralistic theory, individual is entitled to certain rights against the community, and he also owes certain duties towards the community, and hence essence of citizenship lies in the life of community. This is also believed by pluralist theory. Here also they are saying that it is individual's duty also to serve the country or serve the community. So the pluralist theory insists on inquiring into all types of discrimination against people whether on grounds of gender, race, religion, property, education, occupation, or age. So they want to stop this discrimination because they are hindering in the, particularly giving citizenship to a person. Now let's talk about feminist theory of citizenship. So in our previous chapter, we have learned about feminist theory, how they, see patriarchy, how they deal with the gender issues, discriminations. So here in feminist theory, we will be talking about how they see citizenship. So, feminists have argued that women are second class citizens world over due to dominance of men in civil, political, cultural, economic, and social spheres of life. Why? Because it is always men who is dominating the civil and political life, culture, economy, and social spheres of life. So all of these, spheres are dominated by men. That is why women are treated as second class citizens. So women have less level of political participation in any country, while they also have less political representation also as compared to men. So they have also questioned the distinction between the public, that is about the political participation, and the private, that is about domestic spheres, which is a tool to perpetuate male dominance at the cost of women's rights. So feminist theory believes that there should not be any kind of distinctions between the public and the private sphere. It is believed that men are for public sphere. They can politically participate, they can go out, they can hang out, they can discuss political issues outside. But women are considered to be remain in the private sphere, the domestic sphere, where they will be taking care of the household chores, the children, the aged family members. So women have been restricted to the only private sphere, and men's domain is considered to be the public sphere. So this is something which, feminists believe that because of this distinction, it became a tool to perpetuate male dominance at the cost of women's rights. So this is what feminist theory believes about citizenship ideals. Now, let's know about Gandhi's view. So, Gandhi's view on citizenship focused on ideas of common good and active citizenship. So, Gandhi believed that there should be common good, which should be the aim of, any decision making body, and also the citizen should be very active. So, according to Gandhi, all states have coercive power often used to oppress citizens. Gandhi believes that there should not be any kind of coercive powers that is with the state, so that they can don't oppress the citizens. He also believed that a state should not have centralized power. He believed in dharma, ahimsa, satya, which is moral law and duty, non-violence in thought and deed, and also truth and sincerity, as three central pillars of Gandhi's conception of citizenship. This is very, very important point, which is very, very important to note, that what are the three pillars of Gandhi's conception of citizenship? It is dharma, which is moral law and duty. It is ahimsa, which is non-violence in thought and deed, and also satya. Now, while ending the chapter, let's talk about the idea of global citizenship. So, the supporters of this global citizenship believe that people have certain rights and responsibilities by virtue of being a citizen of this world. So, the territorial limit of idea of citizenship is being challenged by the global citizenship activists. That is why the migration, transnational economic, and social and cultural exchange are being encouraged. So, with this, I end my lecture here today. Thank you.